I did my project on the effect of lunar day on the number of blue crabs or Calanectus sapidus molts. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Dutton for helping me with my presentation and paper. I would like to thank Brian and Debbie Johnson for funding my project. I would like to thank Zachary Johnson for helping me collect my crabs. I would like to thank Tim McKinley for being my motivation for the project. I would like to thank Ms. Thompson for helping me come up with my idea. And I would like to thank you for coming to my presentation. So here's a little background on the moon. The moon, as you all know, is what causes the tides. And during new and full moons, these tides are unusually high or low. There is also a 29-day lunar month in which 0 is new moon, about 15 is full moon, and 29 again goes back to new moon. The legend. Well, there are many legends of strange things occurring under full or new moons, one being werewolves. And even though werewolves are simply a legend, there's a lot of real-life phenomena that occur under full moons. One, for example, a study found that there were twice as many dog bite occurrences under full moons, which I found to be pretty interesting. And there's also a legend that the moon affects crabs and their molting process. So a little bit of blue crab info. Blue crabs are invertebrates, being that they lack a spinal column and they have that hard shell instead of a spinal column. And they shed this hard shell in order to grow. A crab will molt about 18 to 23 times in a lifetime, with juveniles shedding every 10 to 15 days and adults every 30 to 50 days. I use juveniles for my project because of the fact that they molt more frequently and the time limit that I had. It also takes a lot of energy and is a risky process for crabs to molt because they're more vulnerable to predators when they're soft. And there's also an increased mortality rate during the shedding process, which means they die more frequently during the shedding process. So some background. Basically, my motivation for this project was the fact that my uncle is a soft-shell fisherman and I kind of wanted to help him out. Some fishermen believe that more crabs will shed during new and full moon, and I wanted to prove this theory right or wrong and help more fishermen. If this is proved, fishermen could better pinpoint when their crabs will shed, and it will be less likely that their crabs will harden before they get to them. And soft-shell crabs are also worth a lot more than hard-shell crabs, so the fishermen would like to have more soft-shell crabs than hard-shell crabs. My variables. My independent variable was the day of the lunar month, being 0 to 29, and my dependent variable was the number of crabs that molted during each day of the lunar month. So why would this happen? During spring and neap tides, the water level is unusually high or low, or during new and full moon, and this causes more or less seagrasses to be available for the crabs to hide in when they shed so they can be better protected from predators. My hypotheses. My null hypothesis was that the day of the lunar month would not change the number of crabs that molted. My alternative hypothesis was that more crabs would molt on day 0, 16, and 28 because they are new, full, and new moons, than in between. My methods. First, I collected about 30 juvenile blue crabs from Urbana, Virginia in the Rappahannock River. And I collected them off a pier because they like to hide on those little pylons. Then I put them in their own containers to avoid them eating each other because they tend to become cannibalistic when they shed and they eat each other. And as you can see in this picture, I have each crab in their own little individual container. Each day the crabs were monitored closely to make sure none had died or to see if any had shed. And when a crab molted, I recorded the date. And in this picture you can see a crab and its molt, and the crab is a lot bigger than its molt because, as I said before, that's how they grow. And then I matched the dates up with the day of the lunar month calendar. And as you can see in this picture, 0 is new moon, and about 15 is full moon. And then when you get back to 29, it's new moon again. At the conclusion of this experiment, all the crabs were returned back to their natural habitat in the Rappahannock River. So here's my graph. On the y-axis I have the number of sheds, and on the x-axis I have the lunar day. And on the x-axis I also put the different phases of the moon so you can see what day of the lunar month corresponds to what phase of the moon. On new moon, I only had about 1 or 2 crabs to shed. And then on full moon, I only had about 1. The highest number of crabs I had shed was 4, and that was on about day 7. And then on about day 20, I had 3 shed. You can kind of see a trend in my graph, but as you can see, the trend line, the slope of the trend line isn't very steep. I ran a linear regression, and I got a p-value of 0.389, which causes me to fail to reject my null hypothesis. And basically, the number, the lunar day had no significant effect on the number of blue crabs that shed. So why didn't this work? It was an inside and controlled experiment. It was in my garage, so the moon didn't really affect the tanks because it was under shelter. And I didn't put any grasses or protection area in my project, so if I were to do this again, I would add more grasses and protection area, because that was the main mechanism for this working, because when they shed, they hide in those grasses to prevent being eaten by predators. And the moon really had no effect on the water level, and there were no tides because it was inside. So if I were to do this again, I would better simulate the tides, because that was another mechanism for it working. The big picture. I failed to reject my null hypothesis because my p-value was above 0.05. And the lunar day basically has no significant effect on crab molting because of my p-value. And because of this, the legend of moon phase affecting crab molting has proven to be untrue. So fishermen cannot depend on this to better pinpoint when their crabs will shed. Thank you.